And welcome to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. Happy to see everybody. I took a little time off in November, but I'm back now with a batch of holiday episodes. And I'm so excited to be reunited with my friend Angie Schneider. We are here at the Hollywood Heritage Museum, which is right across from the Hollywood Bowl in the heart of Hollywood. And today we're going to talk about character actor Jack Oakie, his life, his career, this brand new exhibit we're sitting in the midst of, and also recommend a lot of his films. But Angie, for some of the people watching this, they may not know who Jack Oakie is. So give us the 101 on Jack Oakie.
Jack Oakie, you know, when I even started curating, this is now the second year I've curated an exhibit on Jack. And every year, and this year, I think it hit me even harder where you start to question what makes an actor relevant today from the past. We obviously know our Joan Crawfords, we know our Betty Davis. There's the ones that we just are household names. But then when you get to somebody like Jack Oakie, who's not only been in so many movies, he's been nominated for an Oscar. He's friends with everybody. He's worked with everybody, which is kind of the twist that we did with the exhibit this year. Is it's about Jack Oakie and his friends.
The 6 degrees. He was Kevin Bacon before there was Kevin Bacon.
I mean, he really was, and he was a great actor. So he's one of those that this time around, I just kept questioning, why isn't he more of that household name? And then if you do bring him up, someone's like, oh, I never heard of him. But then you show them a photo and they're like, oh, I know who he is, because I think that does kind of fall into those character actors, just bit part actors. But Jack Oakie was not even as much considered a character actor as much as he was considered the friend actor. So he played all those roles that was the friend or the
wingman.
The wingman, he's the one that would be in the college movies as the wingman to the football players. Never was a football star. He was always the best friend of the football star.
His character actor.
Exactly. So yeah, like behind us, we kind of recreated what his den would have been like with Oakridge. Because the one thing on loan to us through the Jack Oakie and Victoria Horn Oakie Foundation is all of his autographs, all of his photographs. I mean, he's got an amazing collection of all these oversized autographs we have on display. And it really just tied in of how well he was friends with everybody and all their, people, their inscriptions to him were so personal. And it's amazing to really think that he should be a bigger name because, again, he just ties in with everybody. It was kind of fun. Like, even we have a painting display at the museum for Billy Gilbert. I'm like, I wonder if there's a tie in there. I'm like, oh, sure enough, Jack was in his wedding party, So, I mean, it's just funny how it's just everybody can connect Jack Oakie to.
And he started in silent film. So he was in on this very early on.
He was. And what's special about that as well is not only was he started in silent era, so he came to Hollywood in 1927. And at that time, he was coming off of Broadway. So he got his acting bug in New York City, did a little Broadway, brought him to downtown Los Angeles. And he just decided, let me go run over to the Paramount lot and see what happens. And they signed him right away.
Wow, fate.
Yeah. So he was one of the real strong Paramount beginners. And it's funny because Charles Buddy Rogers, who we know is Mary Pickford's third husband as well, did his eulogy. And the eulogy was so sweet for Jack that apparently they were called the Four Musketeers. So you had Jack Oakie, you had Buddy Rogers, you had Gary Cooper, and then you had Richard Arlen. And they all shared their own dressing room together, and they had a pact. So that way they all stay together. If one of them didn't get any more acting gigs or contract didn't get renewed, they would take care of the other one. So believe it or not, it was. And I guess they stayed very close all those years. And it's an amazing story. And then they all had that fear once the talkies started. So the four of them were still the Four Musketeers when talkies started. And when they all started having to go through the auditions for talkies, they were told right away, only one out of maybe 20 some actors at a time will make it. So if you have Four Musketeers, all four of you are sitting there thinking, maybe one of us is going to make it. Yeah. So that would have been kind of frightening, but they said, Wallace Beery was one of the first to walk in, and he got it right away. So then they knew they were kind of maybe not in the running, but then Jack walked in and he got a contract right away for the talkies. So
great. And what are some of his most memorable films? Because I mean, he made a ton of them,
I
that's for
know.
sure.
He
But
did, you know, and I think probably from the most household of the names be the Great Dictator. He did in 1939.
that was his Oscar nomination,
Yep, that
right?
was his Oscar nomination. He did that with Charlie Chaplin.
Best supporting actor.
And it was adorable. He didn't win, but the studio had so much backing in him to have won that they actually had the same Oscar designer make him his own Oscar that was bent over. It's like Swift kicking a butt, you didn't win. So he still had his own little Oscar that he got. You know, so that would probably be one of his big ones that everybody's familiar with. He did, you know, like Wintertime with Sonia Henney or Toast of New York with, you know, Cary Grant. But his earlier Paramount ones, like he would do Paramount on Parade. He did The Wild Party with Clara Bow. He did about 3 or 4 movies with Clara Bow. He's done about 3 or 4 with Buddy Rogers. So I mean, there's when you really start digging into his filmography, we have a poster there for Little Men that he did with Kay Francis. So and Elsie the Cow.
Wow.
Yeah, so it really does highlight, I think, again, everything he did. But Paramount was his home studio for sure. But he ended up kind of becoming a freelance. So he did Universal, he did, you know, 20th Century Fox, RKO, he did them all.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the recipe because I'm sitting in
Yeah.
front of this plate of muffins going, oh, when do I get to eat these? I want to eat one.
Well, and I thought of you right away because when I started going through and curating, I found 2 recipes. It's the same one, but it's cute because, well, you got that cookbook, The Favorite Recipes
do,
of Movie
yeah.
Stars. So you had actually made it into a postcard.
So cool.
So then you were able to snail mail his breakfast muffins.
Okay.
And then he also had it in a greeting card. It was just kind of cute.
Were these from Jack's personal collection?
It's funny because his mother is the one that's in this photo.
Let's show it on the.
Yeah. So that's his mother, Evelyn. He was very, very close to his mother. He brought his mother out here to Hollywood with him. And I had come across an early newspaper article from like the very early 30s. And it's funny, she even commented on this photo. She's like, they set me up to take this photo as if I cooked. I never cooked a day in my life. I was a teacher. She's like, I taught kids, I didn't cook.
Fair.
So whether or not the recipe is true, we know mom didn't make them. But it is a very basic muffin recipe. You know, there's no blueberries. Probably, I'm sure then they would eat them with probably some nice warm butter or some honey. So I did bring some of my friend who's a beekeeper. So we have some fresh honey right locally.
Wow. So tell us what's in the recipe.
So it really is just your basic, your flour. What was it called? Just
read off the ingredients.
Sure, let's do that. So we had just a little bit of sugar, we had a bunch of butter, some milk, your 2 eggs, your flour, and some baking powder. These are the type of things you really want to follow recipes. You basically separate your yolk from your egg whites. You beat both of those before you add it to your batter. And then it did say that you could add a little bit of sugar and cinnamon to the top. So I kind of did a little bit of both, where I did some plain ones and I did some with cinnamon because I'm like, there's really not much flavor. But let's dive in.
Do the taste test?
Yes. And
to Jack Oakie.
Jack Oakie.
Muffin toast.
It's just a light little butter, like breakfast muffin.
I would recommend adding butter and fruit to it myself.
Or honey.
All right. In fact, favorite recipes of the movie stars was a cookbook from the 1930s. I love that particular cookbook because it has a lot of photos and the artwork in it's really beautiful too. So it's kind of one of my favorites. And also Jack recommends at the end of the article, if in fact these are his words, that he recommends having grapefruit and coffee with these muffins for a perfect breakfast. So Angie and I have grapefruits and we have coffee sitting here on the table as well, because if Jack Oakie says to do it, we should do it. We're going to do it. So
just imagine sitting at Oakridge in a little breakfast nook and enjoying a breakfast muffin.
That's good, honey. Oh my gosh.
Isn't it?
So your friend's a beekeeper? Wow.
Yeah. So it's always nice to have a little local honey.
Mm.
Nice and fresh. Better with the honey.
Mm.
That's why I needed the coffee.
And of course, I have the grapefruit spoon that Cora Sue Collins gave me. And it's not just any spoon, by the way, it's from the 30s. And each side is very serrated. So you could stab it into the grapefruit and probably cut the grapefruit as you're eating it.
Very good.
Yeah. So tell me, Angie, about Jack Oakie's connection to the barn, because I know that while we're eating grapefruit, because I know that the other room in there, believe it's called the Jack Oakie Gallery.
Yep.
Well, tell us about that.
So it's called the Jack and Victoria Horn Oakey Gallery. Basically, it's also kind of interesting when you really take a dive and go down the rabbit holes of Jack and start looking at a lot of the older newspapers. He was really highlighted on almost being one of the most wealthiest actors too, which is interesting, because again, he's not the most well known today, but at that time he was one of the most wealthiest, probably because he did a lot of movies. He basically just invested a lot. He had a lot of land, and then of course we now are familiar with Oakridge, which we could talk about a little bit too.
Let's talk about Oakridge for those who don't know.
So basically, him and his wife, Victoria Horn, who was also a character comedian actress. Probably you'd recognize her from Harvey. She was one of the sisters early in the beginning of the movie. She was a blonde. So she was in Harvey. And they were just very giving. And even after Jack died in 78, she kept this legacy going. She did events, she did fundraisers for UCLA, USC, for motion picture home, just about everything. So they were very giving people, and that was really kind of their legacy. So they find educational institutions kind of like the Hollywood Heritage, where they'll be able to sponsor, but then hopefully teach children, teach people about filmmaking and the history of film, but then also encourage people to watch a Jack movie and get his name out there and help the legacy. So they're very, Victoria Horn was a very giving woman, and it's nice to see that the foundation is still giving and helping that cause.
Yeah. So tell us, because sometimes I do get people that watch these and like they ask me questions, because some of them may not be as familiar with certain stuff. If one wanted to visit Oakridge or learn more about Oakridge, Jack Oakie's famous estate, tell us about it, because a lot of star estates don't stand anymore. So the fact that this is still standing, kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, it's a historical cultural monument, which those that are from Los Angeles, that's our way of designating homes and buildings here. And as we know, with preservation, it doesn't mean it's safe. It just means we can try to slow any process down. So like you said, most homes have been lost, over time, but we're very fortunate to still have Oakridge. And it's up in Chatsworth, which is up in kind of the north San Fernando Valley, right off of Devonshire. And it was originally built by Paul Williams, who's our famous, architect here in Los Angeles, one of the first Black architects that we can really celebrate, which is great. And this is one of his homes.
I love his work. He's one of
I know, it's amazing. And there's even a photo I was able to find in our gallery with Jack and Paul together. But initially Paul built it with Barbara Stanwyck. So it was really Barbara Stanwyck's home first. And then Jack Oakie had moved in, and, even though previous to that was more horse country, a lot more of the thoroughbreds, as we know, like Barbara Stanwyck, everybody had their race horses. One animal Jack brought to the United States is Afghan hound dogs. So you probably have heard of an Afghan hound. They're really tall, lengthy, pretty dogs. And then they were brought to the US because of Jack, and he actually had a whole kennel in the back of Oakridge for them. But now Oakridge is owned by the city, but it is supported by a group called the Friends of Oakridge, and they do movie screenings up there. They do tours. So usually if you kind of follow them on Facebook or the website, they'll post when they have tours so you can actually walk through it.
A few years ago, a guy had taken my cemetery tour, and this older man, and from Orange County, and he called me and he said, I want you to give me a private movie star of LA home. And I said, well, send me the names of who you want to see. He sent me this long list. And I said, well, I'm going to need some time to research all this. And what I found was, when the case of old movie stars here in LA, the homes had either been utterly demolished to the ground,
Mhm.
or they had been remodeled so many times that they bore absolutely no resemblance to how
Yeah.
they looked when the star lived there, like Joan Crawford's house in Brentwood. Or conversely, they'd be like Harold Lloyd's Green Acres, where it's there, but
Mhm.
it's so
Can't see
surrounded
it.
by hedges
Yeah.
that I can point to a hedge, and that's what I got. So
Right.
it was kind of a challenge. I mean, I still did the tour for him, but it was definitely a challenge to figure out how I could give this guy his money's worth. So
Yeah.
I would download like pictures of what they looked like in front of their houses. But well, if you try to peer over that shrub, here's what we'll see. But I feel like other than Oakridge, we also have the Barbara Stanwyck
Yeah.
house, which what's the name of it again? Is that Oakridge?
That's Oakridge.
That's
Yeah.
Oakridge.
It used to
Okay.
be a combination
Okay.
of her name and the marks because she had it.
Marwick.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Okay. And then it became Oakridge.
Right.
So we have Oakridge. The Antonio Moreno house is still standing in Silver Lake, although I know that's not open for tours. And the Joel McCrae Francis
Right.
D Ranch, which I did an
And
episode
Victoria
about a year or
Hills.
so ago there. So there are a handful
Yeah.
that either still stand. Oh, the Marion Davies.
Yeah. the
And
beach
every
house.
January they do a free party there.
Which is still sad. It's still just a beach house. The rest of it,
yeah.
but you still get the feeling. And
Yeah. In my world, that's still a
I know.
mansion. I'm like, guest house, my
Yes,
foot.
we'll
That's
take
still
it.
that's a mansion in my world. But I feel like you can count on one hand the number of star homes that the public can see in any
Right.
way, shape, or form that still bear a resemblance to what they once
And
looked like.
even a smaller scale ones I give to the public, like the great house you mentioned up in Agora Hills, or again Oakridge, you have it open to the public to be able to go and watch a movie in the den, or again be able to walk through it and take tours.
I think those might be the only
think
three.
so.
Oakridge, the Francis D. Joel McCrae, and the Marion Davies.
Yeah.
Those are the only three that
Are public.
we can think of that are
Yeah.
public places that
you can go and enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was kind of fun because going back to Oakridge, is it this book here? Part of Victoria Horn Oakie's legacy with keeping Jack's memory going, she did quite a few books, and she actually did one called Jack Oakie's Oakridge. So I mean, it's all just a book of all the photos. Oh, there's a Paul R. Williams one.
Oh, let's show that to the camera.
There he
By
is.
the
You
way,
can see
for those of you
architect.
who love LA architecture, Paul Williams was one of
There
the
he
most prolific
is.
architects in LA history. Over 2,000
yeah.
buildings.
But then it's just photos after photos of what it looked like when he was there, and this is how I was able to lose some paper recreate like the little dens behind us, is just taking some of his photos and seeing, okay, well, what autographs did you have where on the wall and everything
Wow.
like that. So very well documented, which is also nice because then you can take a tour and be like, oh, I'm standing right where Jack stood.
I just thought of a fourth one, the Will Rogers
Oh,
house in
yes, you're
Pacific
right.
Palisades. Okay, so Marion Davies,
Still one hand.
Jack Oakie, Francis D. Joel McCrae, and Will Rogers. Okay,
Yeah.
still one hand, but now there's 4 fingers up instead of 3 fingers up. So
Exactly.
there you go.
Exactly.
But in my fantasy world, I wish some filthy rich person would buy the Marilyn Monroe
I
house in
know.
Brentwood
Make it
and
be
just
part
be
of it.
like,
Come
Number
on.
5.
is it? Yeah. Put it out there in the world.
I'm
and
just
be the
gonna
best.
set out that Christmas wish. And,
Exactly. But yeah, so Oakridge is a great place to still go and experience his legacy with Victoria. And then that's another book he had wrote about, he was also kind of known as, I don't want to say the inventor, but he was most popular for the double takes, and that was kind of his niche. So he even made a book called Jack Oakie's Double Takes, which just kind of talks about his life and his filmography a little bit. But
Okay.
probably my favorite book, and again, it's Victoria Horn Oakie did this book, but his birthday parties were obviously with all the friends that he had. You can just
Legendary.
imagine what these parties were like. But to even show how legendary he is, she was smart. Whenever they would have these parties and they have these big cakes with Jack's face all over it, she would have them all write cards. So this is almost every actor or actress you could probably even think of. I mean, Gene Kelly, Mary Pickford, Gene Wyman, and Blythe.
Oh,
You just go through it,
wow.
and it's just comments after comments of every one of these famous actors and actresses just getting a little note to Jack and what he meant to them, and
wow.
what their experiences were with Jack. So the fact that you can have a whole book made about all your friends and what they had to say is legendary. I mean, who else can
Yeah.
do something like
Well,
that?
and the thing about Jack is we've talked about this on the show before. you never hear stories about him fighting or
Oh, yeah.
feuding. No scandals
No
that I know
scandals.
of.
Yep.
No controversies. He seems maybe that's again why people don't know him
Yeah,
as well
that
because
could
of
be.
that.
Yeah, and he grew up, he was born in Missouri, and at the age of 5, they had moved to Oklahoma. So that's how I got the last name Okie.
Okay.
Because he was an Okie.
Right.
Otherwise, it was Oldfield. So he had his mother, Evelyn, and then he had his father, James Madison. James Madison died when Jack was about 10. So really, he was raised by his mom and his grandmother, and he kind of had to go back and forth between back to Kansas and or Missouri and um, Oklahoma to live with his grandmother and his mother. So he's raised by very strong women. Like that was, he always acknowledged his mom as she was both my mother and my father. So I think that helped him kind of, and none of his parents were in the entertainment world. They weren't vaudeville like a lot of these kids kind of grew up, and they got into. His father was a businessman, his mother was a teacher. We actually had the wedding certificate from his parents on display, and Mark Twain attended their wedding. That just shows how prominent like his dad was from a businessman.
Oh
and
my
then
gosh, yeah.
on when Jack was born, Mark actually gave him a son, his personal copy of Huckleberry Finn. So it's just starting that far back. This guy was exposed to everybody, but I think he just grew up very attached, well raised by his mother. So I think that kind of played a role with it. And just even looking at his relationships, he was married once before, but then of course marrying Victoria, they were so much in love for all those years until they passed away. But his first wife, Benita, she actually died in the same plane crash as Earl Carroll. So that's kind of her twist of fame, that was his first wife.
And they were married when she died.
They had just divorced. So
okay.
they were kind of going through the divorce when that happened. But I think his love though, Victoria, one of the sweetest things I think we have on the exhibit was David, who is the person that runs the foundation. When he had early on met with Victoria, she had this Ziploc baggie of all these wishbones that were unbroken. And he asked her, he's like, well, why do you have all these wishbones? And she says, me and Jack were the happiest. We had everything in the world that we needed. We never had a break a wishbone because we had nothing to wish for. But we kept them to represent that we never had anything to wish. So we have a whole bag of wishbones on display. What kind of story is that? It's amazing how much these two really loved each other. And there's a great video that we have playing here of just some behind the scenes with those two, some home videos at Oakridge, and they were just adorable. There was so much love. I mean, they were just constantly hugging and kissing. It was the sweetest thing. So I don't think there was ever controversy because he was just a happy-go-lucky. You can kind of see on the mat that was all of his logos. It's all all for fun. So he was just a very happy-go-lucky guy.
Because I think a lot of the stars that we do remember, as we've talked about like last year with Tyrone Power, is that they either made super, super iconic movies like Wizard of Oz, Citizen Kane, stuff that just went through the stratosphere in terms of cultural moment. And then also the ones that were larger than life personalities that had multiple divorces and affairs and scandals and controversies, and just their lives were so turbulent that people are like fascinated.
Exactly.
Which may make for a good read, but I'm sure they would have preferred to not maybe have a life that was like that.
But then you have to hear the stories like the wishbones, because then it's a twist where you're like, you want to hear those stories because it's a happy story, not something that's so horrifying.
We should all be that fortunate. I mean, what a beautiful story.
So I mean, it's just really kind of neat when you go around and see the exhibit that really tells the stories of, again, how happy he was, how great he was to his friends, and all the gift giving that was going back and forth, and just like I said, again, looking at all the autographs, all these little inscriptions of how much people loved them. Being a Valentino fan, there's actually an interesting signed photo in that case. You can kind of see it from here. You can see Valentino with a judge. And so Valentino had been cited. I can't remember what the reason was. So he had to go to court.
Okay.
And that judge actually signed that photo too. Jack, so he must have been even friends with the judge that had cited Rudolph Valentino.
Oh my gosh, there are some real treasures here.
Yeah, we have Gloria Swanson signed photo, Sophie Tucker.
Let me ask you this, Angie. You are very involved in the Hollywood Heritage Museum. how do you guys go about curating? Because I know from firsthand
Yeah.
seeing you work, this is an epic job. This is hard work. And you have a bazillion things to sift through in order to tell a story about a star. So,
Yeah.
how do you do that process?
I mean, you just said the right word. It's a story. And I do that even myself as a personal collector, because as a collector, you can go extreme and just buy everything under the sun. But what fits into your narrative? What fits into these stories? So, in a case like this, where we have so many archival boxes of stuff that belongs to Jack Oakie, as you are sifting through it, I go into it first with what's the story this year? And like I said, this year it's about his friends, because last year when I was going through it all, I'm like, oh, these autographs are just absolutely amazing. And who doesn't love our autograph photos? So I'm like, his autographs need to come out. And I'm like, it needs to be about his friends this time. Um, so yeah, it kind of started with that and just being able to highlight, we have a whole exhibit for Sonia Henning. And then I'm thinking, well, it's wintertime, so let's do a twist on her wintertime and stuff like that. And then, he knew Harold Lloyd, so we have some Harold Lloyd's ornaments out.
Oh, yay.
So I mean, it really, we have a little Cary Grant exhibit from Tulsa, New York.
Star of the month on TCM
Oh, that's
for
right,
December.
yes. And a whole row of all this photos. So really it was again about highlighting, and then also Paramount. Because
Yeah.
again, the barn is a birthplace at Paramount Pictures. So we wanted to make sure we tied into Jack's beginning at Paramount. We even pulled out, we have a guest register from Paramount Studios from the early 20s. When any guest came to Paramount, they had to sign the book. It's got Buster Keaton's signature in there. All sorts of great names in that book as well. And then the best thing is we have Jack Oakie's Paramount keys. We worked at Paramount, so those little keychains and stuff like that. So yeah, you go into it with the story first. And this year the twist was again about his early days at Paramount, his friends. Then it becomes fun and more people get excited. So you'll get some volunteers that'll start coming through and sweating. We had Jack, and he helped me kind of go through the photos and be able to organize those in the little dens. It's just kind of fun to recreate those areas and stuff like that.
Excellent. So if somebody was new to the world of Jack Oakie, where would you tell them to start? Like if they watch this episode and they're like, wow, I don't know who he is, but I'm willing to learn. Like, what would you say is this is the starting point?
I think The Great Dictator, he really did. He almost outshined Charlie Chaplin in that one. Like, I almost still wonder, how did Charlie feel after that movie? Because I think, yeah, Jack Oakie really stole the show on that one. So I think to kind of get just his style and his acting, I think Wintertime with Sonia Henny is a great one. Again, Tulsa, New York are some of my favorites. But then you get to the silent ones, like I said, some of his collegiate movies that he did with W.C. Field, or Close Harmony, and some of those that he did with like Buddy Rogers and stuff. So if you like silence, you have plenty of great silence. Paramount on Parade he did. And then as well as more contemporary movies like The Great Dictator. So you do have a wide range depending on what kind of movies you like, which is great for an actor to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And his career, it began in the 20s. And when did he make his final film?
Oh, that's a good question.
It was like it
was later. It was probably in the 40s, and he started doing RKO. So he definitely went to the 50s, because he came a bit more into the other studios later, especially in the 40s when he really started doing a lot more with RKO and Universal and stuff like that.
Okay.
But did you want to watch? Should we try to walk the computer?
Yeah,
give you a little tour.
I'm gonna give you a little guided tour.
See kind of some ideas that you're gonna have when you come to the museum.
Hey. Okay, we are standing in front of the Christmas tree at Hollywood Heritage, and our mutual friend and colleague, Margot Gerber, did one heck of a job making these beautiful Christmas ornaments that feature Paramount Pictures stars. This is so cool.
She knows the assignment.
She certainly does. She certainly does. And this tree looks really, really beautiful. Now we're gonna walk over here to one of the display cases, and Angie will tell us.
Yeah.
These are Christmas cards here.
Yep, so we have, again, we're trying to introduce a little bit of the holidays as well. So, I mean, celebrities of the golden era, they were just like us, and they like to send out their greeting cards for the holidays and Christmas time. So we have cards in here from everybody from Bob Hope to Barbara Stanwyck to Will Parsons, you name it.
Wow.
A lot of cards on them.
Over here is a Sonia Henney display case
Yeah.
because Sonia Henney co-starred with
So
him.
when Jack Oakie had worked over at 20th Century Fox, he did a few movies with Sonia Henney. So we have a half-sheet poster for Wintertime, which was a 1943 movie. And he also did another movie with her in 1942 called Iceland. So there's a photo of him and her on the set. And then we also have one a little bit later on with the two of them older, but still great friends. And then this case here is kind of dedicated to a little bit of his RKO years, and then plus just some more great of his autographs from his friends. So we have a 3-sheet poster for Toast New York, some of our signed photos from Joan Crawford, Gloria Swanson, Sophie Tucker, some great fun buddies. If you're a Cary Grant fan, he was in the Toast New York too. And then the cane that's on display here, he did, was a screen use cane from the movie Colleen that he did with Dick Powell and Ruby Keeler and Joan Blondell. So if you're a big Warner Brothers pre-code fan.
Excellent.
And to our Jack and Victoria Horn Oakey Gallery, we have a case here dedicated to, of course, no other than the Great Dictator from 1939. Which he again was nominated for
Best Supporting Actor Academy Award.
And then, they must, him and Victoria must like canes. They had a cane representing his movie The Great Dictator. There's a cane also behind us from Harvey that Victoria was in. And then a case dedicated to her. So we have her Harvey cane, from which did the movie Harvey, but then as we were talking about the wishbones, there's the wishbones.
Oh, that's so cool.
And of course the little story about it, and the fact that they never needed to break them. They always had the wishes they need.
That is so sweet. Really makes him human.
It really does. And we have a case dedicated to his best friend, Charles Buddy Rogers. And again, they did several movies together, including Close Harmony, that we have that Jumbo Lobby card for, and Someone to Love. But they had a lot of gatherings at Pig Fair, which was Buddy and Mary's home. And that's a great Paramount campaign book you just showed, and it highlights one of Jack's movies, Kid Boots, which never came to happen. So sometimes those campaign books came out so early that the movies never even came out, or the titles have changed. And of course, we have a little exhibit dedicated to Clara Bow, which he did a few movies with her, including The Fleet's Inn in 1928, and The Wild Party, and Paramount on Parade.
Mae West shoes.
Of course, gotta include Mae West. And the connection there is through W.C. Fields, because Jack and W.C. Fields and Ben Turpin did a movie called $1 Million Legs. Had a collegiate feel of a movie. And then some more fun Christmas cards. So those are from Jack and Victoria Horn. So if you ever got a Christmas card from Oakridge in that era, that's what they would have looked like. And we have...
I think my favorite thing in this exhibit is the
Those
Oscar
cups.
cufflinks.
No, he had those specially custom made, so they're not licensed, but they are beautiful. And he had fun wearing them. And
I really want to know the story about the Krampus cufflinks. That is boggling my mind right now.
Hey, how are you? Just get some footage of the exhibit. And then we have some of Jack Oakie's mother, Evelyn's hat and her purse. And there's a great photo of Jack and his first wife, Anita, and again, his mother. And just some fun little, that actually is from a Cheerio box. You used to be able to get these Cheerio boxes and cut them up and make your favorite comedian. Then of course the books that we have out of